The rain hammered down like a relentless judgment, turning the narrow desert highway into a slick ribbon of black peril. Olivia gripped the steering wheel of her battered old sedan, her knuckles white against the worn leather, as the engine sputtered and died with a final heartbreaking cough. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the empty stretch of road ahead, nothing but endless sagebrush and the faint glow of distant mountains. In the back seat, her 7-year-old son Lucas huddled under a threadbare blanket, his small face pale and streaked with tears. "Mummy, it's scary," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm's roar. They'd been driving for hours, fleeing the dim lights of a crumbling town where bills piled higher than hope, her part-time job at the diner barely keeping the roof over their heads. Now, stranded in this God-forsaken nowhere, the world felt like it was closing in. Olivia's heart pounded as she fumbled for her phone. No signal, no help, just the creeping dread of vulnerability. What if another car came? What if it wasn't friendly? She locked the doors, whispering prayers into the darkness, the wipers slapping futilely against the deluge. That's when the thunder of engines cut through the storm like a battle cry. Headlights pierced the sheets of rain, not one or two, but a swarm, dozens of them blooming from the horizon like fireflies in the night. Olivia's breath caught as the convoy materialized, a thunderous phalanx of motorcycles, their chrome gleaming wet under the downpour, riders clad in leather vests, patched with the emblem of an iron fist clutching a broken chain. They weren't speeding by, they were slowing, encircling her car with precision, their beams forming a protective halo that banished the shadows. The lead bike pulled up beside her window, its rider, a weathered man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and eyes like forged steel, cut his engine first. He was Ethan, though she didn't know it yet, a man whose scars ran deeper than the tattoos, snaking up his arms, remnants of a life forged in the fires of lost brothers and unspoken oaths. Ethan killed the ignition, rain dripping from his helmet as he leaned in, his voice gravelly but steady over the patter. "Ma'am, you all right in there?" Olivia hesitated, her maternal instincts warring with fear, but Lucas peeked out, wide-eyed at the spectacle. The bikers didn't rev their engines or shout. They waited, a wall of silent guardians, their pharoies casting warm light into the car's interior. One by one, they dismounted, forming a human shield against the storm, pulling rain ponchos from saddlebags to drape over her vehicle. Ethan's gaze softened as he saw the boy. "Name's Ethan. We're the Iron Vow, folks who don't leave good people out here alone. What's the trouble?" Olivia's voice cracked as she explained the breakdown. The long drive from a place that had chewed her up and spit her out after her husband's abandonment 2 years prior. Ethan nodded, no judgment in his eyes, only the quiet resolve of someone who'd stared down worse nights. As the rain eased to a drizzle, the bikers sprang into action with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. One, a burly veteran named Marcus, with a prosthetic leg from some forgotten war, popped the hood, his flashlight beam dancing over the flooded engine. "Distributor caps shot. Water got in deep," he grunted, already rummaging for tools. Another, a woman called Riley, with a fierce braid and a healer's touch, knelt by the back door, offering Lucas a candy bar from her pocket. "Hey, kiddo, ever seen a real convoy before? We're like knights on steel horses." The boy giggled, the sound a fragile spark in the gloom, and Olivia felt the knot in her chest loosen for the first time that night. Ethan stood watch, his presence an anchor, but beneath his calm exterior stirred memories he'd buried deep, a promise made decades ago to a comrade in the dust of a desert battlefield. "We look out for the ones who can't fight back. No one rides alone." Word spread through the ranks, like wildfire on dry grass. Radios crackled softly, summoning more from the nearby rally point, a gathering of the Iron Vow, a brotherhood bound not by blood, but by vows etched in loss and loyalty. Ethan had been drifting from that life, haunted by the ghost of his own failures. The wife who'd left after his discharge, the son he'd never known how to reach, the ink on his skin, a reminder of brothers lost to senseless wars. But seeing Olivia's desperation, the flicker of fear in Lucas's eyes ignited something dormant. This wasn't just a breakdown, it was a call, echoing the oath he'd sworn under a blood-red moon. "Boys, sisters," he said into his calm, voice low and commanding, "we're towing her in, full escort, no arguments." The response was a chorus of affirmatives, engines rumbling back to life, not in threat, but in solidarity. They worked through the night, the scent of wet leather and motor oil mingling with the earthy petrichor. Marcus jury-rigged a temporary fix, enough to limp to the nearest safe haven, a roadside motel run by an old vow ally. But it was the tow truck that arrived first, summoned from the club's network, its driver a grizzled mechanic named Jacob, who owed Ethan a life debt from a barroom brawl years back. As they hitched the sedan, the bikers formed ranks around it, headlights blazing like beacons, turning the desolate road into a river of light. Olivia watched from the truck's cab, Lucas asleep against her shoulder, tears blurring her vision. These weren't the outlaws of whispered tales, they were redeemers, shadows turned to saviors in the storm. By dawn, as the first rays kissed the horizon, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson, the convoy rolled into the motel's gravel lot. Ethan lingered as the others dispersed, handing Olivia a worn business card etched with the Iron Vows sigil. "We're not ghosts, ma'am. If trouble finds you again, you call. That's our promise." She nodded, words failing her, but in that moment, a thread connected them, a silent pact born of the night's mercy. Little did she know, this encounter was the spark that would draw Ethan back into the fray, unearthing secrets from his past that threatened everything. For in the world of the Iron Vow, one act of kindness could summon a storm of its own, testing loyalties forged in fire and revealing the true cost of honor. The motel sign flickered to life, a neon promise against the fading dark, and as Olivia settled Lucas into a warm bed, the distant roar of bikes faded like a guardian's whisper. But the story was just beginning. A tale of rain-soaked roads and unbreakable bonds, where a single mother's plea would rally a legion and challenge the shadows of corruption lurking in the heart of their town. The motel room smelled of faded lavender and stale coffee, a sanctuary pieced together from threadbare quilts and the hum of an ancient air conditioner rattling against the morning chill. Olivia eased Lucas onto the sagging bed, his small chest rising and falling in the rhythm of exhausted sleep, his curls damp against the pillow. She brushed a lock from his forehead, her fingers lingering as if to ward off the night's ghosts. The window overlooked the gravel lot, where the Iron Vows bikes stood like silent sentinels, dew-kissed chrome catching the first slivers of sunlight. Ethan had insisted on posting a watch, 2 riders, one at the entrance, the other patrolling the perimeter, until she could get her car sorted. "Just in case," he'd said, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken cautions, eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting shadows to stir. Down in the motel's cramped office, Ethan nursed a mug of black coffee, the bitter steam curling around his face like smoke from a battlefield fire. The owner, a wiry woman named Grace with laugh lines etched deep from years of highway tales, slid him a plate of eggs over easy. "You boys always show up like thunder in the storm, Ethan. What's the story this time?" He grunted, fork scraping porcelain, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the breakdown, the fear in Olivia's eyes mirroring the terror he'd seen in a young medic's face decades ago, under a sky choked with sand. That promise, whispered in a foxhole as shells whistled overhead, "We protect the vulnerable, brother. No one falls alone." His old comrade, Daniel, had died clutching that vow, his last breath a rattle of unfinished oaths. Ethan had carried it like a chain, heavy and unyielding, until life had worn him down to drifts and regrets. But last night it had snapped taut again. Outside, the convoy stirred to life. Marcus limped across the lot, his prosthetic clicking softly on the gravel. Toolkits slung over his shoulder as he inspected Olivia's sedan, hitched to Jacob's tow truck. The engine bay still reeked of flooded electrics. Sparks of last night's jury rig had left faint scorch marks on the wires. "She'll need a full rebuild," Marcus called to Riley, who was wiping down her bike's handlebars with a rag that smelled of oil and resolve. Riley nodded, her braids swinging like a pendulum, her own scars hidden beneath the vows patch, a jagged line from a knife fight in a corrupt border town, where she'd learned that justice wasn't always served by badges. "Ethan's calling in favors, thinks this ain't random. Roads like this, breakdowns don't happen without eyes watching." Her words hung in the air, laced with the undercurrent of suspicion that bound their brotherhood. The iron vow wasn't just riders, they were watchers, guardians against the underbelly of small towns where power twisted like barbed wire. Olivia emerged from the room an hour later, showered and in borrowed clothes from Grace. A flannel shirt too big, jeans rolled at the cuffs, carrying Lucas on her hip. The boy rubbed his eyes. Clutching a toy truck Riley had slipped him, its wheels a promise of motion restored. "We fixed the worst of it for now," Ethan said, rising from the bench outside the office, his leather vest creaking softly. He gestured to the truck, where Jacob tinkered under the hood, sparks flying like fireflies in daylight. "But you'll need parts. There's a garage in Willow Creek, about 50 miles east. We can escort you there, make sure you get settled." Olivia's gaze met his, gratitude warring with the pride that had kept her fighting alone since her husband vanished into the bottle and the night, leaving debts and doubts in his wake. "I can't ask more of you. You've already—" Ethan cut her off with a raised hand, gentle but firm. "You didn't ask. We offered. That's how it works with us." As they loaded up, the full weight of the vow assembled. Not the full chapter, but a dozen strong engines purring low like a waking beast. The air hummed with the scent of revving exhaust and fresh brewed resolve, the desert awakening in waves of heat that shimmered off the asphalt. Lucas waved from the truck's window, his fear from the storm replaced by wide-eyed wonder at the parade of steel and leather. Olivia climbed in beside Jacob, the cab's vinyl seats warm from the sun, radio crackling with static and faint country tunes about lost highways. Ethan mounted his bike at the lead, throttle twisting as the convoy formed a rolling shield, bikes flanking the truck in a V formation, headlights dipping and rising like breaths in unison. They pulled out onto the highway, the motel's neon sign shrinking in the rear view, a flicker of refuge left behind. The road unwound under tires and treads, sagebrush blurring into a green haze, the sun climbing to burn off the last mist. Ethan rode point, wind whipping his face, thoughts churning like gravel underfoot. Willow Creek wasn't just a pit stop, it was a powder keg. Whispers had reached the Vows network, rumors of a local sheriff's crew shaking down single moms, foreclosing on homes for kickbacks from developers eyeing the land for strip malls and shadows. Olivia's flight from the crumbling town? It fit the pattern too neatly, her abandoned husband tangled in those same webs. Debts not just from vice, but from threats. Ethan's grip tightened on the bars, the vibration traveling up his arms like an old wound reopening. He'd walked away from the fight once, after Daniel's death, letting the system claim another soul. Not this time. The promise pulled him forward, a tether to redemption. Halfway there, the horizon darkened, not with clouds, but dust. A black SUV crested a rise, unmarked and aggressive, barreling toward them with the arrogance of authority unchecked. Ethan's radio buzzed. "Incoming, boss. Looks like trouble sniffing us out." The convoy tightened, engines growling in warning but no aggression. Just readiness, a wall of loyalty against whatever storm brewed. Olivia's heart raced in the cab, Lucas pressing close. As the SUV slowed, windows tinted like secrets. It veered past without stopping, but the glance lingered, a predator's survey. Ethan watched it fade in his mirrors, jaw set like forged iron. This breakdown wasn't chance, it was bait, and the vow had swallowed the hook whole. By midday, Willow Creek's outskirts appeared, ramshackle buildings huddled against the foothills, a garage sign swinging lazily in the breeze. They rolled in as a force, drawing stares from locals nursing sodas on porches. The mechanic, a vow affiliate named Nathan, with grease-stained hands and a knowing nod, greeted them at the bay doors. "Heard you were coming. Let's see what we've got." As Olivia watched her car get wheeled inside, the weight of the morning settled. These strangers had become anchors in her unraveling world. Ethan dismounted, pulling her aside under the awning's shade. "Stay sharp here. Town's got eyes. If anything feels off, you holler." She nodded, a spark of her own resolve igniting, the first threads of trust weaving through her isolation. But as the sun beat down, casting long shadows across the lot, Ethan felt the pull of deeper currents, a call on his burner phone, voice low from an old contact. "That SUV belongs to Sheriff Hale's crew. They're circling your good deed, Ethan. Watch your back, and hers." The promise expanded, no longer just a roadside mercy, but a declaration against the corruption festering in Willow Creek's veins. The iron vow would ride, not for glory, but for the quiet honor of keeping one mother's light from going out. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The garage in Willow Creek hummed with the low symphony of wrenches clinking against metal and the hiss of air compressors, a mechanical heartbeat pulsing under the midday sun. Nathan wiped sweat from his brow with a forearm smeared in grease, his eyes narrowing as he peered into the sedan's engine bay. The air carried the sharp tang of solvent and overheated rubber, mingling with the faint, dusty scent of the foothills that cradled the town like wary arms. Olivia stood at the edge of the concrete floor, Lucas tugging at her hand, his toy truck clutched like a talisman. The boy's curiosity had bloomed under the biker's easy camaraderie, but now his gaze darted to the shadows beyond the open bay doors, where the black SUV had vanished into the haze. Ethan leaned against a rusted workbench, arms crossed over his vest, the iron vow patch catching a glint from the fluorescent lights overhead. The burner phone burned a hole in his pocket, the contact's words echoing like distant thunder. Sheriff Hale's crew. Hale, a name that slithered through the vow's whispers like oil on water, a man who'd turned badge into shackle, squeezing the life from folks like Olivia for scraps of power. Ethan had crossed paths with his kind before, in the blurred years after the war, when justice wore a uniform stained with greed. Daniel's face flashed in his mind, young and unscarred, promising under that foxhole sky. "We stand for the forgotten, Ethan, or what's the point?" He'd failed that oath once, letting a corrupt outpost claim his brother's life without a fight. Not again. This woman and her boy, they were the spark, igniting the vow he'd let rust. "She's got a cracked manifold here, plus the wiring's fried like bacon," Nathan muttered, his voice a gravelly drawl honed by decades under hoods. He straightened, wiping hands on a rag that had seen better days. "Couple hours. I can patch her up good enough to roll, but parts might take a day or two. Town supplies thin these days." His eyes flicked to Ethan, a silent question hanging in the air. Willow Creek's garage wasn't just a fix-it shop. It was a node in the vow's underground web, a place where riders traded intel as freely as tools. Nathan had patched more than engines for the club, wounds from scraps with Hale's deputies, bikes hiding fugitives from rigged foreclosures. Olivia shifted, her borrowed flannel sticking to her skin in the building heat. "A day? We can't afford..." Her voice trailed off, the weight of unpaid shifts at the diner pressing down like the storm clouds gathering anew on the horizon. She'd fled her old life not just from abandonment, but from the creeping threats, calls in the night demanding payments her ex had racked up, shadows at her door hinting at worse if she didn't sell the family plot. The car breaking down felt like the final twist of a knife, stranding her in a town that reeked of the same rot. Yet here, amid the clangor, she felt a fragile shield, the biker's presence, their unspoken promise weaving through the chaos. Ethan pushed off the bench, his boots scuffing the oil-stained floor. "You won't pay a dime. Vow's got it covered." He met her eyes, steady as the desert floor, but inside, doubt gnawed like a hidden fault line. Rallying the crew meant pulling them into the fire, risking the fragile peace they'd carved after years of loss. Marcus and Riley lingered outside, sharing a smoke under the awning, their postures alert as hawks scanning for prey. Jacob tinkered with his tow truck nearby, but his glances toward the main street betrayed the same unease. The SUV's pass hadn't been idle. It was a probe, testing the Vow's involvement. As Nathan dove back into the engine, sparks flying in brief angry bursts, Ethan stepped out into the lot, the sun baking the gravel into a shimmering haze. He pulled the burner, dialing a secure line to the Vow's elder, a voice from the shadows named William, who'd mentored him through the raw edges of brotherhood. "It's Ethan. We're in Willow Creek. Picked up a civilian, single mom kid. Breakdown on the highway, but it's smelling like Hale's game." William's response crackled through, low and measured. "Hale's been pushing harder. Word is he's got a developer in his pocket, clearing land for some resort scam. Folks like her? They're the easy marks. You stirring the pot?" Ethan's jaw tightened, the wind carrying the faint whine of sirens from town center, routine or warning. "Stirring? Brother, I'm answering the call, that promise we made. It's pulling me in." Inside the garage, Lucas had wandered to a corner stacked with old tires, stacking them like makeshift forts, his laughter a bright counterpoint to the tension. Olivia knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder, but her mind raced back to the life she'd left. The ex's gambling debts twisted into leverage by Hale's underlings, forcing her hand until she packed a bag and hit the road. "Mummy, are the bike men our friends now?" Lucas asked, his eyes reflecting the hope she dared not fully embrace. She nodded, forcing a smile, but the question pierced her. These strangers, with their scars and oaths, offering what her blood family never had. The afternoon wore on, the sky bruising purple as thunder rumbled in the distance. Riley joined Olivia, offering a bottle of water from her pack, her braid damp with sweat. "We don't do this for thanks," she said softly, her voice carrying the lilt of someone who'd once been the stranded one, pulled from a ditch by the Vow after a bad split. "But we do it because someone did it for us. Ethan's got a code, deeper than ink." Olivia listened, the words sinking in like rain on parched earth, stirring her own buried resolve. She'd been running, but perhaps this was the stop she'd needed, a chance to stand with allies forged in fire. Ethan's radio buzzed then, Marcus's voice cutting sharp. "Boss, we've got company. 2 deputies rolling up slow, Hale's boys, unmarked cruiser." The lot tensed, engines idling low as the Vow formed a loose perimeter, not aggressive but unyielding. The cruiser pulled in, dust swirling in its wake, 2 men in crisp uniforms stepping out with the swagger of men who owned the streets. The lead deputy, a stocky figure with a mustache like a broom bristle, eyed the bikes with thinly veiled disdain. "Heard about a breakdown last night. This your doing, Iron Vow? Stirring trouble in our town?" Ethan stepped forward, calm as a coiled spring, the sun casting his shadow long across the gravel. "No trouble, deputy. Just helping a lady in need. That's not against the law, last I checked." The air thickened, charged with the unspoken, Hale's reach, the Vow's defiance. Olivia watched from the bay, Lucas hidden behind her legs, her heart hammering like the approaching storm. The deputy's gaze lingered on her, recognition flickering, a predator scenting vulnerability. "We'll see about that. Sheriff wants a word." He turned back to the cruiser, but the threat hung, a dark promise of reckonings to come. As the cruiser peeled away, tires crunching gravel like bones, Ethan exhaled slowly, the vow's weight settling heavier. This wasn't just protection anymore. It was war, quiet and moral, against the corruption that preyed on the weak. He'd ride it through for Daniel, for the boy peeking from the shadows, for the family the road had chosen. The thunder rolled closer, mirroring the storm building in Willow Creek's heart, where one mother's stand would test the unbreakable bonds of honor. The gravel crunched under the cruiser's retreating tires, a fading echo that left the garage lot steeped in uneasy silence. Ethan stood rooted, his gaze tracking the dust plume until it dissolved into the shimmering heat waves rising from the blacktop. The sun hung high now, merciless, baking the air until it wavered like a mirage, carrying the acrid bite of exhaust and the faint, metallic tang of tension. Inside the bay, Olivia pulled Lucas closer, her arms a barrier against the unseen threats circling like vultures. The boy's toy truck lay forgotten on the concrete, its plastic wheels still, mirroring the stalled breath in the room. Nathan paused mid-wrench, his grease-smeared face hardening into lines etched by too many close calls in this forsaken corner of the world. Ethan turned back to the group, his voice low and steady, cutting through the hum of idling engines like a blade. "They'll be back. Hale doesn't bluff." He motioned to Marcus and Riley, who nodded in unison, their postures shifting from watchful to wired. Marcus holstered a flare gun in his saddlebag, non-lethal, but a signal that could summon the full vow like a beacon in the night. Riley knelt by Olivia, her braid falling forward as she gathered Lucas's toy, handing it back with a wink that masked the steel in her eyes. "Stick close, hun. We've got your flank." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of oaths, sworn in smoke-filled bars and rain-lashed roads, a chosen family's code that no badge could shatter. As the afternoon dragged into a sweltering haze, the garage became a makeshift fortress. Nathan worked feverishly on the sedan, sparks dancing like fireflies from his grinder as he patched the manifold with scavenged parts from his backroom stash. The air thickened with the scent of molten metal and cooling solder, a gritty perfume of makeshift salvation. Olivia paced the edges of the bay, her borrowed jeans whispering against the concrete, her mind a whirlwind of fragmented memories, the ex's slurred apologies dissolving into silence, the eviction notices stamped with Hale's indirect mark, the way her old town had squeezed until escape was the only breath left. She'd thought the highway would wash it clean, but Willow Creek reeked of the same decay, power-hoarding scraps from the desperate turning vulnerability into currency. Ethan slipped away to the rear of the lot, where a cluster of bikes formed a steel perimeter under the awning's ragged shade. He pulled William back on the burner, the line crackling with static that mimicked the storm brewing in the distant peaks. "Deputies just probed us. Hale knows we're here." William's reply came measured, laced with the gravel of years commanding from the shadows. "He's got the developer's ear, some slick operator named Victor Kane, buying up foreclosed lots for a casino front. Your mum's story fits, ex-tangled in debts, car sabotage to strand her. Get her clear, Ethan. But if you push, we'll back you. The vow holds." Ethan closed the phone, the device heavy in his palm, Daniel's ghost whispering through the circuits. He'd buried that fire after the war, letting it smolder in solo rides across empty plains, but Olivia's quiet strength, the way she shielded her son without a word, fanned it back to life. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was this moment, choosing to stand when the easy path was to ride on. Inside, Lucas had warmed to the chaos, trailing Nathan like a shadow, handing him tools with chubby fingers that left smudges on the wrenches. "Does it go vroom now?" the boy asked, his voice piping over the whine of the compressor. Nathan chuckled, a rumble from deep in his chest, ruffling the kid's curls. "Soon enough, champ. These machines got heart. They just need a little TLC. Olivia watched, a soft ache blooming in her chest. This was family, not the fractured one she'd fled, but one forged in grease and grit, where loyalty wasn't demanded, but lived. Riley joined them, pulling a deck of cards from her vest pocket, dealing a simple game on an overturned crate. "Keeps the mind sharp," she said to Olivia, her eyes flicking to the road. The game unfolded slowly, cards slapping down like quiet declarations, laughter threading through the mechanical din, a brief oasis in the gathering storm. But the peace fractured as the sun dipped toward the foothills, painting the sky in strokes of amber and bruise purple. A low rumble approached, not bikes, but the growl of multiple engines, deliberate and unhurried. Ethan emerged from the shadows, radio in hand, as 3 cruisers nosed into the lot, lights off but presence screaming authority. Sheriff Hale himself stepped from the lead vehicle, a tall man with a paunch straining his uniform shirt, his face a mask of false joviality undercut by eyes cold as riverbed stones. Flanked by deputies, he sauntered forward, boots kicking up dust that swirled like accusations. The vow tensed, a ripple of leather and resolve, but Ethan raised a hand. Hold, no escalation. "Evening, folks," Hale drawled, his gaze sliding over the bikes before locking on Olivia, who stood frozen by the bay door, Lucas tucked behind her. "Heard you've been playing roadside angels. Admirable, but this town's got rules. That lady there, Olivia, right? Got some outstanding matters back home. Debts, papers, nothing personal." His smile didn't reach his eyes, the lie hanging thick as the humidity building before the rain. Olivia's breath hitched, memories flooding, the forged signatures on her ex's loans, the threats veiled as friendly reminders to sign over the land her family had held for generations. Hale's crew had orchestrated it all, turning her flight into a trap. Ethan stepped between them, his frame blocking the sheriff's view, voice even, but edged with iron. "She's under vow protection, car troubles fixed, she's free to go. If you've got business, make it official." Hale's deputies shifted, hands hovering near holsters, the air crackling with the potential for flashpoint. Marcus and Riley flanked Ethan, a silent wall, while Jacob revved his truck's engine, a low warning growl. Lucas peeked out, wide-eyed, but Olivia's hand steadied him, her chin lifting in a spark of defiance born from the day's fragile bonds. "I'm not signing anything," she said, voice steady for the first time, the words a quiet thunder. "Not for you or your scams." Hale's facade cracked, a flicker of rage before he smoothed it over. "Big words for a drifter. We'll see how far your biker friends ride when the law comes calling." He turned, signaling his men, but the retreat was tactical, cruisers peeling out with tires spitting gravel like spite. The lot exhaled, but the threat lingered, a shadow stretching long into the twilight. Ethan watched them go, the vow pulsing in his veins like an old engine firing true. This wasn't over. Hale's probe had drawn blood, exposing the corruption's veins. William's voice echoed in his mind. "Back you." The full chapter would mobilize by nightfall, riders converging from hidden trails, their headlights a promise against the dark. As Nathan slammed the sedan's hood with a final clang, the first fat raindrops spattered the lot, heralding the storm's return. Olivia gathered Lucas, the cards swept away, her resolve hardening like cooling metal. The iron vow encircled them, engines humming in solidarity, ready to escort her through the gathering night. Ethan's scars itched under his sleeves, reminders of battles won and lost, but for the first time in years, the weight felt shared. Honor wasn't solitary, it was this convoy cutting through the rain toward justice's fragile dawn. If this story is stirring something in you, hit that like button. It helps spread these tales of quiet courage far and wide. The rain came down in sheets again, transforming the garage lot into a muddy quagmire that sucked at boots and tires alike. Ethan wiped water from his eyes, the droplets cold against his sun-baked skin, as he scanned the retreating taillights of Hale's cruisers slicing through the downpour like red knives. The air hummed with the low growl of idling engines, the Iron Vow's bikes forming a ragged circle around Olivia's freshly patched sedan, their chrome bodies slick and gleaming under the assault. Thunder rolled overhead, a deep bass note that vibrated through chests and handlebars, echoing the storm, brewing not just in the clouds, but in the marrow of every rider there. Nathan slammed the bay doors shut with a metallic clang, his face etched with the grim resolve of a man who'd seen towns like Willow Creek swallow good souls whole. Olivia bundled Lucas into the sedan's back seat, the boy's small frame shivering under the blanket despite the heater's feeble warmth. The interior smelled of damp upholstery and faint traces of the candy bar Riley had given him earlier, a sweet counterpoint to the ozone-sharp scent seeping through the cracks. "Mommy, are the bad men gone?" Lucas whispered, his eyes wide pools reflecting the dashboard glow. She forced a nod, her hand squeezing his knee, but her pulse thrummed with the aftershock of Hale's gaze. Predatory. Knowing, as if he'd already mapped her fears. The sheriff's words clawed at her. Debts, papers, the land her father had tilled until his hands bled, now twisted into leverage by men in uniforms. She'd run to escape that noose, but the highway had looped her right back into its grip. Ethan mounted his bike, the leather seat creaking under him like an old friend's sigh, rain beading on his vest as he keyed the radio. "William, it's time. Full muster. Rendezvous at the old mill turnoff. Hale's circling. We need numbers." The elder's voice crackled back, steady as bedrock. "Riders inbound. Hold the line, Ethan. The Vow's alive in this." He twisted the throttle, the engine's roar cutting through the rain like a declaration, and the convoy coalesced. Marcus and Riley flanking the sedan, Jacob trailing with his trucker's backup, the rest fanning out in a protective wedge. They pulled out slow, headlights piercing the deluge, turning the narrow road into a luminous vein, pulsing against the night. Olivia gripped the wheel, the wipers slapping rhythmically, her mirrors filled with the glowing eyes of her unlikely guardians. The miles unwound in tense silence, broken only by the staccato patter on helmets and the occasional radio check-in. Ethan's mind raced ahead, fragments of the past colliding with the present. Daniel's laugh in the foxhole, cut short by a sniper's whisper. The night he'd ridden away from the Vow after burying his brother, oaths unraveling like frayed rope. He'd told himself it was survival, drifting through dusty towns with nothing but the road's endless call, but solitude had carved hollows in him deeper than any scar. Olivia's plight, a mother shielding her son from shadows he'd once ignored, had dragged him back, the promise resurfacing like a tide, pulling at forgotten shores. Redemption wasn't a clean slate. It was this wet ride, honoring the vulnerable when the world turned blind. Halfway to the mill, the ambush hit like lightning, unmarked vans bursting from a side trail, blocking the road with screeching brakes and swirling gravel. No sirens, just the slam of doors and the glint of badges under flashlight beams. Hale's deputies, 6 strong, fanned out with shotguns leveled, not at the bikes, but low, aiming to intimidate without crossing into full assault. The lead van's door swung open, and Hale emerged, rain streaming down his hat brim, his uniform plastered like a second skin. "End of the line, Vow!" he bellowed over the storm, voice amplified by the wind's howl. "That woman's got warrants, fugitive from justice. Step aside or we'll make this official." His eyes locked on the sedan, a smirk twisting his lips. The corruption in Willow Creek laid bare, a sheriff playing God, foreclosing dreams for a developer's purse, her ex's debts a fabricated chain to drag her back. Ethan killed his engine first, the sudden quiet amplifying the rain's fury, dismounting with deliberate calm. The Vow followed suit, a wall of leather and steel forming between the vans and Olivia's car, hands visible but fists clenched. Marcus's prosthetic leg grounded him like an anchor, Riley's braid whipping as she positioned herself at Ethan's side, her healer's hand steady on a concealed med kit. "This ain't about warrants," Ethan said, stepping forward, water sluicing off his shoulders. "It's about shaking down the weak. We've got eyes on your game, Hale. Kane's casino scam, the forged papers. Let her go, or the vow rides to every station from here to the border." The words hung heavy, a moral gauntlet thrown, the air electric with the standoff's fragility. Olivia's hands trembled on the wheel, engine idling, Lucas's whimpers muffled from the back. She cracked the window just enough to hear, the cold spray misting her face, stirring a fire she'd long banked. These men, with their oaths and scars, stood for her, for the justice her old life had denied. "Tell him," she murmured to herself, voice stealing. "I'm not running anymore." But Hale laughed, a bark swallowed by thunder, gesturing to his men. "Big talk from outlaws. Cuff her, boys. The rest scatter, or we light this road up." The deputies advanced, boots splashing through puddles, the tension coiling like a spring about to snap. In that heartbeat, Ethan's radio erupted. William's voice, urgent, "Backups here. Hold." From the tree line, headlights bloomed, a fresh wave of vow riders materializing from the storm, engines thundering like judgment. 20, then 30, their beams converging to blind the deputies, forming an unbreakable ring. Hale faltered, his smirk fracturing as the odds shifted, the moral weight of the vow crashing down. No shots fired, no blood spilled, just presence, unyielding loyalty, turning the tide. "This town's watching, Sheriff," Ethan said, voice low over the din. "Your house of cards ends tonight." Hale signaled retreat, vans peeling away into the rain-smeared dark, but the damage was done. The corruption exposed. A reckoning ignited. The convoy reformed, adrenaline thrumming through veins as they pushed toward the mill, a derelict structure by the river, its silhouette a jagged tooth against the lightning-flashed sky. Olivia exhaled shakily, glancing in the mirror at the riders' lights trailing like stars, her isolation cracking under the warmth of chosen bonds. Ethan rode point again. The rain washing clean the doubt, Daniel's promise alive in every revved heartbeat. Willow Creek's shadows loomed, but the vow's light cut deeper, a beacon for the lost, proving that honor, once stirred, rode eternal. The mill's rusted gates creaked open ahead, sanctuary in the storm, but the true battle, for truth, for family forged in fire, lay just beyond the dawn. The mill loomed like a forgotten relic against the storm-lashed sky, its corrugated walls groaning under the wind's assault, rusted beams whispering secrets of bygone industry. Rain sluiced off the tin roof in relentless curtains, pooling in the cracked concrete yard, where the Iron Vow's bikes assembled in a thunderous symphony, engines cutting off one by one to leave only the patter of drops and the river's distant rush. Ethan dismounted first, his boots splashing into the muck, the chill seeping through his jeans like an old regret resurfacing. Headlights swept the shadows, illuminating faces etched with resolve. William at the forefront, his silver hair plastered flat, flanked by 24 riders who'd answered the call from hidden crossroads and dusty trails. The air hung heavy with wet earth and exhaust, a gritty incense for the vigil ahead. Olivia eased the sedan to a stop beside the cluster, the engine's tick cooling like a sigh of relief. She cut the ignition, the sudden quiet amplifying Lucas's soft breathing from the back seat, where he'd drifted off amid the chaos, his small hand still clutching the toy truck. Stepping out, she pulled her jacket tight against the downpour, water beading on her lashes as she scanned the gathering. These weren't just men and women in leather. They were a tapestry of scars and stories, eyes reflecting the same quiet fire that had pulled her from the highway's maw. Riley approached with a spare poncho, draping it over her shoulders, the plastic crinkling like fragile armor. "Safe house till morning," Riley said, her voice a steady anchor. No one's touching you here." Inside the mill's cavernous interior, the group huddled around a makeshift fire pit, barrels ringed with crates, flames dancing shadows across graffiti-scarred walls that smelled of damp wood and faint mildew. William nodded to Ethan, passing a thermos of hot coffee that steamed in the chill, its bitter warmth cutting through the cold knot in his gut. "Hale's rattled," the elder murmured, his gaze sharp as a hawk's. "That stunt on the road? Desperation. But we've got leverage. Recordings from Nathan's garage cams, timestamps on those forged docs your contact pulled. Kane's scam unravels with one push to the right ears." Ethan sipped, the liquid scalding his tongue, memories flooding. Daniel's foxhole vow, the way brotherhood had mended fractures war had carved. He'd drifted too long, letting isolation dull the edge. But Olivia's stand, defiant in the garage's glare, had honed it sharp again. The riders settled in, voices low over the rain's drumbeat, sharing smokes and strategies like sacred rites. Marcus propped his prosthetic on a crate, recounting a similar scrape in a border town where the vow had exposed a crooked judge without a fist thrown. Jacob tinkered with a radio, static hissing as he tuned to a frequency carrying whispers from Willow Creek, locals murmuring about Hale's overreach, the developer's bribe seeping into every cracked foundation. Olivia sat on the sedan's tailgate, Lucas curled against her, the fire's glow softening the lines of exhaustion on her face. For the first time since the abandonment, she felt the weight lift, not gone, but shared. These strangers weaving a net around her frayed edges. "Why?" she asked Ethan quietly, as he joined her, the flames crackling between them. "All this for us?" He stared into the fire, embers mirroring the spark in his chest. "A promise, ma'am, made to a brother long gone. We look out for the ones the world forgets. Mums like you, kids like him, rode away from it once, after losing too much. But last night, it called me back." His voice roughened, the rain outside a veil for the vulnerability cracking his armor. Olivia reached out, her hand brushing his scarred knuckles, a silent bridge across the chasm of their losses. Lucas stirred, blinking at the circle of faces, and William knelt, offering a story of a lost pup he'd rescued on a lonesome ride, turning it into a lesson on loyalty's quiet power. Laughter rippled, fragile but real, binding them tighter than any chain. Dawn crept in grey and reluctant, the storm ebbing to a misty drizzle that hung like regret over the yard. The vow mobilized with precision, bikes rumbling to life as Ethan outlined the play. Ride into town, deliver the evidence packet to a state investigator waiting at the diner's edge. Anonymous drop, no confrontation. But Hale anticipated, his cruisers blocking the main drag as the convoy rolled in, the air thick with the scent of wet asphalt and brewing standoff. No guns drawn, just a sea of headlights washing the street in stark white, the vow's presence a moral tide eroding Hale's facade. The sheriff stood on the courthouse steps, paunch straining his shirt, deputies arrayed like faltering sentinels. But the wind carried the murmur of townsfolk gathering, whispers of foreclosures, bribes, the land stolen from families like Olivia's. Ethan dismounted, envelope in hand, striding forward through the mist, the packet heavy with proof. Audio of Hale's demands, ledgers tying Kane's resorts to the graft. "It's over, Sheriff," he called, voice carrying clear over the idling engines. "This goes to the feds. Walk away clean, or let it drag you down." Hale's face twisted, rage warring with calculation, the crowd's eyes his undoing. Justice not in violence, but in the light of truth piercing the shadows. He barked an order, cruisers parting like a defeated wave, the envelope vanishing into the investigator's unmarked car as it slipped away unnoticed. No arrests that hour, but the seeds were sown. By week's end, headlines would echo the fall, Hale's empire crumbling under audits and indictments, Cain's schemes exposed to the sun. Olivia watched from the sedan's wheel, Lucas waving at the dispersing riders, her heart swelling with a redemption not her own, but shared. The garage had delivered her car whole, Nathan's final tweaks ensuring the road ahead stretched open. As the Vow formed a final escort to the town limits, Ethan rode beside her, the mist lifting to reveal a sky bruised but breaking blue. "You kept your word," she said at the junction where paths diverged. He nodded, the vow etched deeper now, a legacy carried forward. "And you've got family now if you need it. Iron Vow, call any time." The sedan pulled away, taillights fading into the horizon, a single mother's journey reclaimed. Ethan lingered, the brotherhood revving behind him, engines a chorus of unbreakable bonds. Daniel's promise lived, not in graves or ghosts, but in this quiet victory. Honor riding eternal against corruption's tide, for the chosen who stood when the world turned away. The desert bloomed under the emerging sun, sagebrush whispering of new beginnings, the road calling them home. Thank you for riding along on this journey of promises kept and hearts mended. If these stories of quiet courage resonate with you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more tales from the open road waiting just for you.